Welcome to Prepper Talk Radio. I'm your host, Scott, as usual. And today, Shane is actually out of the office. Not really, I guess it's not an office. He's out of studio. He's actually helping his kid at Cub Day Camp. So I've got the semi-reluctant, always excited, Matthew McConaughey impersonating Spencer, the Schwendiman.
All right. Let's do this, man. I'm excited to be here.
Spencer's a good friend of mine. He's actually helped out with PrepperCon, and he also has his podcast, Are We Prepared Yet?, which is over on Podbash.
I wore the shirt for you so you'd remember.
I see that. That's pretty awesome. Powered by Podbash.com. Now, you guys been doing this for a couple of years now.
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Okay.
So...
And for those of you who've never heard of these guys before, they do kind of the poking fun at the apocalypse. Let's have fun talking about the topics. Kind of a comedy of sorts, because when the crap hits the fan, it's going to suck. So you might as well have some fun now, right?
It's a parody of your show, Scott. Let's be honest.
It's a parody. Oh wow, thank you. I'm being parodized.
It's flattery for you.
It's flattery.
It's so yeah. I actually started it with your brother-in-law Josh, and then he left the show.
So that had nowhere to go but down.
And when he left the show, it went up.
Yep.
And so we started the show because we looked around and we saw that nobody was really having fun with preparedness. And, I'm a funny person, and I found that a lot of things in preparedness, you kind of just have to sit back and laugh at yourself for doing. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do. We just sit back and we laugh. We have a good time. We put out a new episode today, and it was survival on the moon. You know, a situation.
I saw your link to it. I was going to listen to it.
The
survival on the moon.
The crazy meme. Yeah. So we just like to have fun, and we'll never be in that scenario. But we talked about things like, okay, you want to bring water, you want to have food concentrate, or that's what they called it. It's food, first aid. We talk about all the same things, but in a fun way. So
yeah, those poor NASA astronauts, all the food paste products. It's interesting. Before we go on, so I want to kind of follow a pathway with what you just opened up.
No worries.
Before we want to go on, I want to point out a couple things here first. One, if you're not following us on Facebook and social media, get on there. Prepper Talk Radio on Facebook, Prepper Talk Rad. I know, we're just awesome. Rad on Twitter. And make sure you're also following K-Talk, KTKK at Twitter, and K-Talk Utah on Facebook. If you want to call in, joining the conversation today, it's 801-254-1640. We're now on the 1640 end of the dial, still on AM. And we are, I believe, the coolest, but also the longest-running talk radio show, definitely in Utah, but one of the top 3 in the nation. So thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for if you're live streaming us on our website, that's awesome. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening on the radio locally, thank you. And we also want to put a big shout out for Survival Medical. They're one of our sponsors. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this show. So thank you, Survival Medical. I recommend you check them out. Best first aid kits I've ever used. I don't have to worry about them getting dirty, getting wet, expiring quickly. They've got a 20-year shelf life, and they're in these really, really heavy-duty bags with Ziploc and a water seal. So they're legit. They're awesome. They've got a kit for anything you're doing. So let's go back to the moon real quick for a second. We were just talking about food paste or whatever.
Yeah, concentrate.
Food concentrate. So I'm reading this book, Born to Run.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
So your prior co-host is a running freak.
Yes, he is.
And it's an incredible story because he's lost like 180 pounds running. He was a big dude. He's still a big dude. He's like 6'5", and he's...
Well, he like dwarfs me, and I'm 6'2", 6'3", and
okay, so he's like 6'6", maybe. Yeah. I don't know, but he's a big dude. I mean, he's just a tall dude, and he's crazy distance runner now. But it's interesting. As I'm reading through this book, they just talked about the astronauts and how they age so rapidly in space. 3 days can be like 13 years. I'm like, wait, what? The bone density degradation, the weight loss, the muscle atrophy.
Yep.
Just everything you do in space is just destroys the body. Like, we need gravity, right? Our bodies need gravity. We're designed as creatures that require gravity. We require resistance.
Yeah.
And that's what it all boils down to. That's kind of the topic of our show ongoing is the fact that we require hardship for us to endure and for us to actually thrive, right? Thankfully, we're not going to space anytime soon. Hopefully, by the time we do, there's gravity where we're going.
Whenever they ask for volunteers, like for those manned, what is Elon Musk's doing, going to Mars and stuff, I'm always laughing at people. I'm like, why do you want to go up there?
I would like to go into the vacuum of space and not have any help. I just see every one of those scenarios play out kind of like the Alien movies. I'm like, if you do come across somebody else, do you think they really want you encroaching on their space? I mean, how pissed off do we get when someone cuts us off in our lane?
I know, right?
Especially here in Utah. Like, I've never seen more lazy lane drivers than I do in Utah. And I lived in California for a long time. In California, they're more aggressive.
Yeah.
You get flipped off a lot more. But they'll stay in the right lanes for the most part. But most of the lanes, especially on the freeway, you're only going 15 miles an hour for about 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the evening. So you've got a few windows of time where it's nice. But here, you get the lazy lane drivers in the far left lane that are going 5 under, and they're like, well, this is my lane. My taxes pay for it. You can't have it. Like, I don't know what the attitude is, but it's just so weird. You're like, seriously? And everyone's passing them on the right.
I always view it as a vigilante behavior where they're like, I'm going to keep everybody from speeding. I'm just going to slow down.
Yeah, that.
And in actuality, it's I'm going to get everybody into an accident.
Yeah. Oh, I saw an accident yesterday.
Did you?
Motorcycle rider with a trailer. The trailer high-speed wobbled, and it took him out.
Oof.
And I was just like, and it happened behind me. It was really, oh my gosh. And had I not been so far ahead, I would have stopped and gone back. But the cool thing was all the cars pulled over right away, and he had this whole biker gang with him. And I saw guys running over with red packs. I'm like, oh, first aid kits, we're good. I'll keep going. So I just called 911, told them where the accident was, what happened, and they said, okay, go ahead and leave since you're too far away.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to preparedness. There were other drivers on the road that were prepared.
Yeah.
Right. I was prepared. I've assisted on many accidents, and I've used the first aid kits that I've gotten from Survival Medical, from My Medic, from building my own. The typical Johnson & Johnson box crap from Walmart never works when I need it. So I've tossed all those out. I've scavenged the good bandages out of there and then used them as long as they'll last. But you got to move on. But the point is it all goes back to preparedness. And I think the big picture of preparedness is everyone's waiting for the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, I can't wait for when the crap hits the fan because I'm insane. And that's what I look forward to. And
I want the world to fall apart, yes.
And tongue-in-cheek, I'll say that. And then I say, no, I'm kidding. And I'll let people know that. But, who's really excited about the apocalypse?
Not I.
Who's really excited for an economic collapse?
Nope.
Sometimes Shane says that, but I think it's because he's got more silver stockpiled than the rest of us. And he's just like, hey, that stuff's better than gold. And I'm like, cool. But he's kind of expert level on that.
Yeah.
He studies that every day and has been for more than a decade. So he's really a lot smarter on that than I am. So he probably shouldn't poke fun. He can come in here and hog tie me later with his knot tying skills that he learned at day camp today. But the point is we all focus on these big picture items, or the big ticket items, I guess you'd say, primarily.
Well, it's your year and a half, your year of food storage, your year of water storage, your 72-hour kits. It's everything that's huge.
My 12,000 rounds of 223 ammunition, and
I've got barrels of ammo and stockpiles of silver and a safe full of guns. But what it really comes down to with preparedness is how well prepared you are for even just the smallest daily occurrences, in my opinion.
Well, it's not when the crap hits the fan; it's when the hiccups happen.
Yeah.
Right. And when the hiccups happen, it's basically the offsetting of your daily rhythm or your daily routine and being able to get back to normal as quickly as possible. Well, let's kind of talk about when the crap hits the fan. What are the hiccups that we need to be better prepared for that we're not? Number one, when the crap hits the fan, where are you crapping and how are you cleaning it up?
That is the really big question. Sanitation is going to be the biggest problem. It is the biggest problem. Anytime there's an earthquake anywhere, sanitation is the biggest problem.
Well, and that's something you've actually studied in school.
Yeah.
like emergency preparedness. What's the actual degree called?
So when I was at UVU, I transferred back up to the U, but when I was at UVU, it was an emergency management degree.
Emergency management.
Yep.
And sanitation was kind of the talk of the town all the time.
It's always the hot topic. Even when I was just taking a natural disasters course at the U, and we talked about earthquakes, we talked about tornadoes, we talked about tsunamis, and every time we had to talk about what's the sanitation like in this scenario.
And what's the sanitation plan for recouping, right?
And it's always dig a ditch.
Dig a ditch. Well, and that's the simplest, best way to do it, because you can then bury what you've just excreted, right?
Well, and you dig a ditch far enough away that, your water supply is not going to be affected, because that is the big thing. You know, if you've got groundwater, I'm too far from the mic, I apologize. If you've got groundwater, if you've got a stream or anything, you don't want to be anywhere near that with your waste.
Right.
And so that's one thing that you have to look at as well. But yeah, your sanitation, and even we don't think about it, but running water is such a everyday thing that it's just in the back of our mind. Water's always going to run. How are you going to wash your hands? How are you going to wash your dishes? How are you going to wash yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some of the big things.
What do you do when the toilet paper runs out?
Ooh,
let's be honest.
That's my biggest fear.
When the toilet paper runs out, I mean, some of us are using bidets, but when the water pressure turns off, that's gone too, right? So what are you going to do when the toilet paper runs out? Or what are you going to do, alternatively, to take care of your crap, right?
Yeah.
To take care of it's a dirty topic, but we've really got to talk about it. I mean, for example...
it's the first thing I do when I build a 72-hour kit is I put toilet paper in there, because you pull that cardboard roll out, you wrap it up, put it in a little Ziploc baggie, and dump it in your... I've got like 2 rolls in every 72-hour kit I build, because it is my biggest fear, running out of toilet paper.
That's substantial. Now, why? Why is that your fear?
Well, because it's one of those comfort items.
Okay.
It's something that, for me, comfort goes a long way in preparedness and in survival. Having toilet paper can be the key between a good attitude and a bad attitude.
True.
I mean, well, think about it. When you go to the restroom, I'm sorry, I'm going to get in a little bit of potty talk here. When you go in to go to the bathroom, you do your business, and you look over and you see your toilet paper roll is empty, there are very few feelings that are worse than realizing you're out of toilet paper.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we got a caller. Let's bring him on. Hey, thanks for calling K-Talk. You're on the air with Prepper Talk Radio. Do you have a comment for us?
Comfortable to run around just like the animals and not be able to clean yourself,
Well, the animals, they're a little more efficient in their use of their excrement. I mean, they don't have the Klingon issue that we have typically.
We used to raise cattle, and we had a dairy, and they don't have a problem, but they don't care. But anyway, I think during the Depression, my old man and his siblings, and they had a lot of corn cobs that they saved. And they don't put out the Sears catalog anymore. That was always good to have, or you could always keep old phone books.
That's actually on my list. So the corn cobs, it's a great comment. Because
a little abrasive.
They can be. So one of the recommendations we found is before you use it,
soak it for 5 minutes.
Soak it or hit it with a squirt bottle before you sit down to do your business or before you squat. Let it soak in that moisture, and then that way you've got kind of a loofah type of an experience. But it's a one-and-done type of thing. You don't want to keep repeating using that thing because you're just reapplying bacteria.
Yes, and a bag of lime for the latrine. It kills the bacteria.
Absolutely. Hey, we're running into a break. Give us a call back after the break. We're out of time for this segment. We'll be right back. Again, reminder, we are brought to you by Survival Medical. That's survival-medical.com. We'll be back after a message from these sponsors. Well, welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio with Scott, and today, Spencer Schwendy. Thanks for being part of the show today, Spencer.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dude, this is awesome. So we're doing a little bit of a potty talk conversation this morning. We're going to switch gears in a little bit and talk about so what, and I'll explain what that is later, so stay tuned.
That's clever.
It's pun intended. So again, switching back to the crap conversation, toilet paper alternatives, right?
Yeah.
This is one of the things. Everyone stockpiles their toilet paper, but then once the toilet paper runs out, what do? There's different types of leaves you can use. There's also different types of leaves you do not use.
No.
Under any circumstances. I mean, some survivalists I've talked to, they use the stick method, where they get a nice stick, a soft stick, and they'll wipe everything out with that.
That can go so wrong, though.
It can go wrong in a lot of different ways. And then they'll burn the end of it and use it again once it's time to go again. Interesting.
It's an ashy bottom right there.
Well, yeah, obviously you prep it before you put it back in there. But I mean, I guess that could be good. It's applying lye, right?
Yeah.
And that's a disinfectant that'll kill bacteria. But there's different types of leaves you could use. Thimbleberry leaves, hazelnut leaves. You could do bolted lettuce. Actually, even works well. Cottonwood leaves. Don't have too many.
Maple, right?
Maple, mullein. But then we've got, here's my favorite. I grew up calling it Indian toilet paper, but the also known as lumberjack toilet paper is that large-leaved asters. That plant that's got one side is kind of velvety on the leaves.
Yeah.
And they grow all over Utah. The high desert areas are great areas to find these. I grew up in Colorado, so they were everywhere, right? So we would actually
some scout camp stories coming up.
No, like my brother and I, we would actually go. We had fields surrounding our neighborhood. We're like the last little part of Littleton, but we were unincorporated Littleton.
Oh, okay.
And we actually had Highlands Ranch and Inglewood between us and Littleton.
Yeah.
And now we have Lone Tree between us and Littleton. So we're like this donut hole now because it's just grown and there's nothing. The fields are gone now, but used to be that those fields were there. And so our buddies and us, we would go play in those fields all the time. We'd build snares that would never work because there's nothing to snare except for bull snakes, and bull snakes don't slither through a snare very often.
And other buddies.
And it was fun though. We had a lot of fun out there, but every once in a while you got to do a Duke or a number 2 or whatever you want to call it. But we would go find one of these plants, and we just always called it Indian toilet paper, but it's called a large-leaved aster. Heart-shaped leaves, perfect for wiping. They're all over the United States and Canada. So I like them. I recommend them. They're great.
Personal recommendation.
Another one, the fuzzier one, is the mullein leaves. And they look, honestly, it looks like a sweater, like the fuzziness of a sweater. It's so soft. It looks, I don't know what really what you want to call it or what you want to say, but they're big, thick leaves. They clean exceptionally well, and it's biodegradable.
That's nice,
right? Because it's a plant. So those are some really good alternatives.
Other really bad alternatives are poison oak, poison ivy. I mean, really, with leaves, my rule always is don't go near it unless you know for sure.
Yep.
Never second guess with foliage with leaves, whether it's with eating, wiping, what have you. You always want to know before you go.
Absolutely. And the other thing is outside of leaves, outside of nature, I mean, you can make your own portable bidet.
Yeah.
Using kind of the pressure can for like spraying around the house, bug spray bottles that you can go get at like the local hardware store. Take a heat gun and you soften up the wand and you curve that wand and bend it back so that you can then use it as a portable bidet, because you can add air pressure, throw a little soap and sanitizer in there.
There you go.
And you can clean off and refresh all at the same time. You just always make sure that you fill it up before you go.
And you're not using bug
whoever
spray.
Gets it below a certain level, yeah. You don't want to use the one that's been bug sprayed in. You want to get a brand new one separate. They're like $15.
Yeah.
Great to have. We've got one at our house for this purpose in case of a crap hits the fan scenario.
That's clever.
So what we want to do now is we want to kind of transition out of the poop talk and talk about some of the other skills or other things you need to be able to do.
Walk away from the bathroom.
So let's jump into the garage for a second and talk about sharpening and utilizing tools.
It's an important topic, especially so. I'm sometimes this way. I know a lot of people who are this way, but, I have a lot of knives, and I found that sometimes I get really lazy with them. And when they start to go dull, I just put it down and pick up a new one. Mm-hmm. But, when everything goes wrong, I can't just go off to Walmart and buy a new knife. I can't just pretend like, oh, okay, I'll just keep using my new knives until...
Well, that gets rather expensive.
Exactly.
I mean, our whole focus with Prepper Talk Radio is to help people save money and be more efficient. But the most efficiency is go buy a whetstone or a hard stone or get a sharpening device.
Even just a sharpening device, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
And I like, the stones to me are great, and the reason why I like using stone is because you can adjust your edge as you go, right?
Manually, yeah.
And you can get, like, if you're doing an oil rub, the thing just glides, and you can get a really, really good edge. Now, it takes longer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the different sharpening devices that have, like, the carbonite in it, and that just grinds away your edge real quick, and you can 3 passes through one of those, and you're sharp, right? There's also the back of the automatic can openers typically have a sharpener in there, and it's two stones. It's a grinding wheels that are offset, and that'll give you a really sharp edge really fast. But also, if you've got a cheaper knife, it'll take the edge right off and give you a whole new edge.
Yeah.
Like, you'll lose that knife. So many passes through that thing, that knife's gone. I found that out at my mother-in-law's house. She had some really bad knives. I'm like, do you have a sharpener nearby? Or I could take them home. And she's like, oh, yeah, there's one on the back of the canner. And I'm like, sweet. And it just took those edges down real fast. So if the electricity's out, she has no other way to sharpen these knives.
Yeah.
And the wheels don't expose themselves until you put the knife in, and then they come out. So they're like offset.
Oh, interesting.
There are some that have different setups, but I'm like, you got to have some kind of sharpening device. Even if it's a sharpening stick, which they usually use diamond embedded in those. Those are great. Something. You got to have something, because when it comes down to it, how do you sharpen your axe? How do you sharpen your knives? Because you're going to need an axe to chop down trees and move debris out of the way.
Well, and with an axe, you have to be so careful because that's a blunt instrument almost. You're chopping with it opposed to carving or whatever with a knife, and so they go dull a lot faster. Yep. I've found axes, hatchets, even machetes.
Yep.
If you use them for what they're intended to do, which is chopping, like, you can kill an edge really quick.
Well, that's why the old adage is, if you're given 4 hours to cut down a tree, spend the first 3 sharpening your axe. Right? It's all about simplest, a path of least resistance. The duller the blade, the duller the axe, the harder you're going to work, and the more likely you are to have an accident and create an injury. That's why they're always talking about how dull is your knife blade.
Yeah.
Because you'll try, if you're carving with a dull knife blade, you're going to work harder, and then all of a sudden that knife's in your finger or in your hand.
Tears. It doesn't cut.
Tears. It doesn't cut, and that's harder to heal. So you want to make sure that your blades are sharp. So that's kind of one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't paying attention to, especially in the preparedness industry. We talk so much about everything else that no one's refreshing to, hey, sharpening your knife, sharpening your blade,
It's a sales tactic. If your knife goes dull, just go buy a new one. I was a sucker for it most of the time, or I just had a stockpile of knives that I got through different boxes or what have you. But
it's not even the sales tactic. I think it's the on-demand lifestyle that we all live. It's like, oh, this one's dull and tarnished. Oh, and there's a little dirt in the handle. I'll just get a new one.
There's a 2-for-1 sale at Walmart for Kershaw. Awesome.
Kershaw is a fantastic little blade.
Oh, I love Kershaw's.
That's what I carry myself, and I'll carry other knives like Spyderco or Gerber. Gerber tends to have a less long-lasting blade than Kershaw for the price, but Kershaw, it just has the affordability level. They've got a price point for everything. Another place I love to get knives is Tops. Tops knives are amazing. I've got their Cub, which is a bushcrafter knife, and that's my favorite knife for when I go in the mountains.
Well, and here in Utah, we're blessed to have so many outdoor companies, and Blade HQ is based out of Utah. And
they're out of Utah County, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. That or 33rd in Salt Lake. I can't remember which one.
Remember.
But I love going to them because they have such a wide selection, and often there are sales.
20 to 30% off almost weekly.
Yeah.
almost weekly. So BladeHQ.com.
And I'm not bought out by them. That's just genuinely something that I love is I follow them on all the social medias because when they get new knives, like it's exciting almost, you know.
Well, what's funny is they have any kind of knife you're looking for, even a 13-foot knife that's a foldable knife.
Yeah.
That's, it's 6 feet long, 7 feet long, and then it's gimmick knives, but they've got those.
Well, they have
all
the
the real
ninja
stuff.
throwing stars and everything, like
tomahawks.
It's just fun.
They've got all kinds of stuff. So check them out. It's kind of funny though. I mean, there's so many different things out there that you can get. Find something that works for you. Make sure every person's bug out bag, if you want to call it that, or 72-hour kit, if you want to call it that, has at least one good knife in it.
Yeah.
It is the most versatile tool you can put in your quiver.
Well, and that's what I tell everybody. I get that question a lot, like, what's your favorite knife? And I say, well, my personal favorite knife, I'm sorry, I just blew a big old P in there, but my personal favorite is a Kershaw for a folding knife, and I love SOG blades for a fixed blade.
Yeah, SOG, S-O-G.
Yeah.
Not SOD, S-A-W-E-D.
Yeah, S-O-G.
S-O-G. Another one is Columbia River knife training.
That's the little folder I had in my pocket, actually.
Great knives. And there's a price point, depending on what you want to do, there's a price point in each one of those companies that'll work for you.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is you have to figure out what knife works for you. Because for me, those are my favorites. But I've got friends who they can't stand using a SOG. It doesn't fit their hand right. Mm-hmm. They have to go with a Gerber, which has a little bit of a wider handle. And so it's a personal preference thing. Some people love K-bars.
Well, it's the same thing with guns. Like, a lot of people will be like, oh, you've got to have this gun. This is the gun you've got to have. Well, maybe that gun doesn't fit right in my hand.
Exactly.
Or it's not comfortable. I don't like the trigger selection. I don't like the draw on the trigger. I don't like the sights. I don't like, everyone has different personal preferences. So it's all about testing it out, finding out what you like, what feels comfortable.
Yep.
What you'll actually carry with you. Is it too big and bulky? Like, I've seen guys carrying knives that are huge. And I'm like, well, are we Crocodile Dundee? What is the practical application of that knife? Right? Are you... what would you do with a giant Bowie knife if you're carrying it every day? I don't know. Maybe one of you callers uses one on a daily basis. But for me, the personal carry knives are the shorter blades, 4 inches or less. Right? My grandpa always carried an old-timer, which is the little 2-inch blade, skinny on one end, and then he's got a 3-inch blade on the other side, both skinny blades, elk handle, all cool stuff. But he would use his little blade every day, and he'd be cleaning out underneath his fingernails.
Yeah.
And, he used that knife almost every day. I always saw him pulling that knife out.
Well, it's like with my wife. I tried to buy her a Gerber folder once. It's in her bug out bag now, but I tried to get her to carry it every day, and she could not do it because it was so big. She's little and petite, and it kind of scared her, honestly. Mm-hmm. So instead, I bought her one of those little Victorinox folders.
Yep.
Just the keychain. And she uses it constantly. She's like, oh, I'll never use this, but thanks. But every day.
Kind of the same thing with my wife. She doesn't use hers. She always is like, hey, can you fix this to me? But I got her a Victorinox. They had a hot pink one.
That's the one I got Lindsay.
Yeah, and it's great. It's got a lot of little devices in there. It's your Swiss Army type knife. With everything on it, but it's only got like 6 things in there.
Yeah,
but it's great. It's small. It's compact. She's always got it with her.
Fits on her keys.
Yeah, and so when she needs it, it's there. And so these are the little simple basic things that I think every prepper should be doing or should have. That's going to help make your life easier.
Well, and then once you find that knife you love, that encourages you to sharpen it. I think that's my personal preference my personal belief as well is, I love my Kershaw blade. And so I sharpen it all the time. I love my SOG blade. So whenever I come back from camping and I use it, I go straight and I sharpen it.
That's a good point. How often should we be sharpening? And this is the skill that we want to focus on. How often should we be sharpening those knives? Between every significant use.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't sharpen it every day.
Yeah.
But if I've used my knife throughout the day to cut things, to cut big plastic things especially, like the thick cutting, I always go and I sharpen my knife. I worked for a hotel for a year and a half, and I used my knife constantly because I was at the front desk, but then I was an on-call maintenance person. And there were things I was using it as a screwdriver at times because I couldn't find, the right screwdriver. And do you have the screwdriver bit in yours? Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous right now.
So I'm for those of you listening in, I actually carry a Kershaw. It's the 1920. And it's got 2 flathead
out
screwdriver tips and 2 Phillips head screwdriver tips in a screwdriver shaft that's hardened steel.
See, that's what I needed when I worked for the hotel, dang it.
And I carry this because as a realtor, one of my pet peeves, my dad's a general contractor. One of my pet peeves is doors that aren't aren't hung correctly.
Yeah.
And so they'll swing open or they'll swing closed. A lot of times it's because the screws are loose.
So you just go in and just tighten?
I'm tightening hinges all the time, and it's probably an OCD thing at this point, but I carry this knife, and I use the screwdriver on this knife more than anything else.
Yeah.
But then I don't have to carry 2 different items. I don't have to carry a multi-tool as well.
Cutting your hand open if you slip, which happened.
But I've used these. My prior vehicle had a little panel that kept coming loose, and so I kept using this to tighten the panel. And then I got some Loctite and put it on the screws, and that problem resolved itself. But talking about tools, talking about things we need. Skills, things that we kind of fall away from. Things like fermentation, simple things like fishing.
Yeah.
Do you know how to put bait on a hook? Do you know how to or remove a hook from a person? Right. That's a simple skill. Or a fish. Oftentimes we forget those things. Those are things that are important. We're gonna keep on this topic and get into some more of the so what type of topics after this break. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the show. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio with today's guest Spencer from Are We Prepared Yet? Or Prepped? No, yeah, Prepared Yet. Are We Prepared Yet? So we'll be right back after these messages. And remember, check out Survival Medical, survival-medical.com, one of our sponsors. Hey, we're going to jump right back in. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 1640. Got Spencer in the house. All of this is brought to you by Survival Medical. That's survival-medical.com. Anything you're doing this summer, you're probably going to need one of their kits for, because I guarantee someone's going to get hurt somewhere along the way. If you're going fly fishing, they've got the on-the-fly kit, which is awesome. Actually has a tool to help you get the hook out.
Hey, there you go.
Which is fantastic. They've also got a new Mariner line. So if you're going boating, if you're hitting Lake Powell or going out in the ocean, make sure you got a good portable and waterproof first aid kit. These guys have first aid kits that are tougher than nature, and they'll last up to 20 years. So without further ado, back into our conversation. We just talked about sharpening knives. A caller called during the break and brought up the point of maintaining handles, right?
Yeah.
Because a tool's no good if it doesn't have a handle to work with. One of my big pet peeves about axes and axe use is a lot of people don't understand how to aim with the axe. And so they'll end up biting off and chunking out the handle right below the axe head, right?
And then an axe head goes flying. And
then eventually that axe head's a flying discus of death. So you want to make sure you're maintaining those tools. And if it gets to a point where it's cracking and it's brittle, you want to replace that. So do you know how to replace a handle?
I don't. Do you?
I do. Do you know how to replace a handle on a shovel? Do you know how to replace or care for, even better than replacing, maintaining it? Rubbing linseed oil on it every year just to maintain that strength and durability, giving it a little layer of protection. Let's take this caller real quick. Hey, thanks for calling K-Talk. You're on the air with Prepper Talk Radio.
Well, I called a little earlier, but anyway, maybe you guys didn't hear Coast last night, but David Adair was on, and he says if the grid goes down in 6 months to less than a year, 90% of Americans will be dead. You are to look up that program, and you can look it up, and some of it's, they have a kind of a synopsis of it in print. Last night's program on Coast, but that's really serious. For some reason, Congress doesn't seem to take it seriously.
Well,
I think that's part of the plan, though.
I think part of the plan is to depopulate the areas and gain further control. FEMA itself actually talks about 94% of the population will be gone in less than 7 months. Yeah. So the numbers are actually a lot worse than we think.
A lot of it will be cholera from sanitation and you name it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Appreciate the call. Yeah, it's interesting. Oftentimes we don't really understand the big picture of what's going to happen or what could happen. There's a conversation I got to be part of a little while ago. A local organization did a study, actually hired it to be done, and they wanted to know what would happen if there was a magnitude 7 earthquake or above.
I think it's a 7.6, right?
I think it was a 7.6 or above, and it was 72% of the population would be gone in 3 months.
Yep.
Gone. Dead. Goodbye.
I did a paper on it.
Oh, there you go. So it's staggering. That's 3 months. 3 months, people. You look down your street, 7 out of 10 houses are now empty.
Well, you think about it. How many people have 3 months of food storage on hand? Not many. We're turning into. I lived in Europe for a bit, and they are a daily shopping culture. Mm-hmm. Groceries are dirt cheap over there, but they go every day for the food they need because they get it fresh. Europe doesn't have preservatives, which is partially why I thrived over there. I'm allergic to preservatives, but
that'll do it.
That'll do it. But yeah, we live in a society where you go out, you buy what you need from the fast food, or you buy what you need from the restaurants, from whatever, when you need it, opposed to having it on hand when it is truly needed.
We're so on demand that we've forgotten how to take it in hand and do it ourselves.
Well, and I think it's the same with tools. You and I were talking a little bit in the break, and when you need a new tool, you just go buy one. When you need a new axe, you just go buy one.
You need a new handle.
Yeah.
You abandon the axe and go get a whole new axe.
But what happens when Walmart's gone?
Exactly. That's the point we're trying to make, is make sure you're maintaining and taking care of the things that you do have. Let's bring this other caller on. Hey, thanks for calling the show. You're on the air with Prepper Talk Radio.
Hey, I'm a expect the best, prepare for the worst kind of guy. But, man, these fear porn statistics are just concerning me. It's more about freaking people out, the truth and reality. But is there any situation in the past in history where even a third world nation suffered those kind of catastrophic losses in any kind of war or natural disaster? Because, we're pretty civilized, we're pretty advanced technologically and educated, and I just don't understand how those numbers could be so significant like that. It just does. It's not significant here in Utah. That won't happen here in Utah. But I'm just saying it just seems too scary to be real.
I think the problem is we a lot of times people focus on the Hollywood perspective of things, and so when they look at it that way, right? You look at, like, for example, the pioneers as they came from the east to the west. What percentage of the pioneers were lost along the way? There's a pretty high percentage of people that died due to dysentery.
Yeah, but they didn't have food and shelter. That
right.
They were traveling. That makes sense. Makes sense.
But after a disaster, what do we have? You look at what happened in Japan after the disaster. Thankfully, when they had that tsunami and the earthquake all at the same time, thankfully, the other half of the island was able to come and provide relief. If we have that earthquake here in Utah, hopefully other parts of Utah and other parts of the nation will come and provide relief. You look at Katrina.
Well, of course they will.
We had relief source, right? We had relief. If we ever have an EMP, I think that's where we really need to worry, is when there's a huge disaster like that and there's no one that can come help provide relief. Because as a group, as a population, most of us lack the basic survival skills to get us through, because we're so far away from that lifestyle, so far away from needing those on a day-to-day basis, that they've become stagnant and we've forgotten about them.
Well, and the other thing is, so I'm the same way as you are, caller. I like to expect the best but prepare for the worst, and that's why I've looked into this. With a 7.6 earthquake, most of our buildings are not prepared to take that. So you lose a lot of shelter. Most of the buildings, especially in downtown Salt Lake, were built in the early 1900s, which means even a 6.0 earthquake could knock out a large portion of the population down there. After that, you lose roadways. You lose...
Your sanitation lines are all disrupted.
If any of the mountains come down, so we'd have to rely solely on air support. But
can I share a story with you guys?
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
Please.
So, I do doors for a living, and I got into doors because of the Northridge earthquake in California. And it was a doozer. I literally couldn't get out of my bed. It was shaking so hard. I thought they dropped the bomb. I was actually waiting for the heat wave to melt my house and my body, because I didn't know an earthquake could shake like that. I literally could not get out of my bed. It was shaking so bad.
Wow.
So, it's a done deal. It happened twice, one right after another, two huge shakes. Anyway, we're all out in the street. We start going to the neighbors' houses because some weren't out, and, they had broken glass and all kinds of stuff. So we helped get our neighbors out. But the next day there was trucks, food and water. The roads were collapsed, and, you spent literally 4 to 6 hours in traffic unless you had a motorcycle like myself, and you made it in an hour.
Yeah.
So, I would definitely say a good prepper tool is a scooter or motorcycle for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But
if you could write a
so
really good
I
blog
started
post on
prepping-
that and share it with me, I could try to convince my wife. She will not let me get one. I've been trying for 5 years, and she's adamant I can't
Just do
have
dirt bikes.
one. Nope.
Still no?
Yeah, I
Still no.
recommend a dirt bike, not a street bike.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got into preparation because I was a teenager then. I had no food, no water, and I literally was standing in line in an 18-wheeler for my water. So that changed my life. But given that circumstance, I was unprepared, totally unprepared, but I was still able to help.
Awesome.
So I was helping neighbors clean up, and I was helping rebuild our neighborhood, and all of our neighbors were doing that. And I think that's what Americans do. But man, it's just when you throw out statistics like 90% of the people are going to die, nobody. I just don't feel people are going to believe that, and they're going to disregard it. But if you were to talk to somebody and say, hey, you got automobile insurance. Why is your car more important than your life? Why don't you have any food storage?
Well, people get life
why do
insurance.
you want to keep your car alive and not you?
Yeah, and people get life insurance, which is really death insurance, right? Money in case I die to pay for
life
my
insurance is food
final
and
costs
water,
and other people.
right?
What are we doing for true life insurance? Which, like you just said, it's your food storage, it's your water storage, it's day-to-day health maintenance, right?
Well,
We're always going to fare better and be able to be a resource to our community. And that's why we started Prepper Talk Radio, is as a resource to help people be prepared-minded and eliminate fear.
Yeah.
We want it to be fun and engaging because these are skills and hobbies you can do. It doesn't need to be something you obsess about and you freak out about all the time. It should be something that you're like, oh, yeah, I'm as ready as I can be for that. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
But in the back of your mind, you always have to keep the reality of the situation. With earthquakes especially, earthquakes are one of my biggest fears, and that's why it's at the top of my preparation list.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Utah, so in California, they prepare for them nonstop because they happen all the time. Here in Utah, they're happening all the time, but they're like 1.5s. We don't feel it. And so when earthquakes do happen, Centerville, 3 years ago? It was like a 3.5. It was tiny.
Well, there's a 3.5 in Centerville 3 years ago. There's also one in West Jordan that was like a 3.2 or 3.4.
But it freaked everybody out.
And that actually happened while I was in a movie watching Thor.
Nice.
So
you just thought it was the movie.
Well, my buddy thought it was the special effects. I'm like, no, that was an earthquake. And he's like, no. So I pulled up my USGS seismology app, and I'm all, oh, yeah, right here.
Because I thought the 3.5 was a truck driving down the road,
But I think the big thing, I think you're right.
Salt Lake is really similar to...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say Salt Lake is very similar to Mexico City. We were once an ocean. Who knows what's underneath this ocean bed? I've heard it's one of the largest gas reserves in the world. So if that comes bubbling up through liquefaction, we're not going to be helping anybody.
Yeah.
we're going to be a valley full of corpses. But
we'll definitely
if it happens
be screwed.
here, I'll tell you what, it is going to be a doozer. If anything higher than a 5 or 6, oh man, all the brick buildings downtown.
Yep.
Sandy, being a sandy city, that place is going to liquefy. It's going to be bad. So yes, we need to be prepared. No, we don't need to freak people out to the point where they just tune out and don't want to be involved. But if something were to happen, it would be catastrophic in my opinion.
I agree. Thanks so much for your call. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It all comes back to daily preparedness eliminates fear.
Yes.
Right? If you're using your food storage, you rotate it out. And the reason you're going to use most of the stuff that you have prepared with is not for the earthquake, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not for, and this is a bigger concern for me, is pandemics, right?
Yeah.
That weird flu strain that all of a sudden kills everybody, right? Because that spreads so fast and is global. For me, that's a bigger concern. Because it can just ravage through an entire city fast.
Well, and it's hard to prepare for it because you don't see it coming. Like with an earthquake, it's the same way. It just happens, but with a pandemic, it starts with a sniffle, and then it ends with a large population.
Well, it's spread by sneezing or handshakes. There's so many different ways to spread that. So and that's a topic we want to bring in a specialist for in the future, but for today's topic, the things you don't think about, what I want to leave you with is we're about to run out of time is...
We missed the so what, dang it.
The so what, the simplest of them all. Learn to sew on a button. Yeah. Learn to hem your pants. Learn to stitch a rip back together.
Even tents, like learn how to sew up a tent, learn how to. It's your shelter. Your clothing is your shelter, and the second that goes away, you are in so much trouble.
Hey, we're out of time. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for being part of the Prepper Talk Radio crew. Jump in on our social media, follow us, and stay tuned for more great shows here at K-Talk.
Thanks for having me on.
1640. Thanks for being here.